Ferrari have just had their worst start to a Formula One season in over 15 years after yesterday's disqualification of both Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc from the Chinese Grand Prix. But more worrying than that is the revelation that Lewis Hamilton's disqualification has had on a major weakness to do with the rear end, and more specifically the rear suspension on the SF-25. But what was that disqualification for? Lewis Hamilton is the one that's been disqualified for excessive plank wear on his plank throughout the race, while Charles Leclerc is the one that is being disqualified for coming in underweight after the fuel sample has been taken out of his SF-25. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, how does last weekend's Australian Grand Prix and the Ferrari team having to race the SF-25 have any bearing on what happened to Lewis Hamilton's car and its disqualification? Well, it's this. If you remember, everything looked rosy on Friday practice in Australia in Melbourne, with the team looking highly competitive. But that situation and picture became very much different when it came to Saturday and then the race on Sunday. And at the time, no one really understood the reasons behind why that was the case. But it came to light that the team had to raise the ride height of both SF-25s in Melbourne, and as a result, the car went that much slower in qualifying and of course naturally the race. But before we move any further in with this video, if you're enjoying the content thus far, do hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for future content on the channel, as it greatly helps not only the channel but myself out as I look to grow this channel throughout this season. And I do greatly appreciate all of you that do subscribe and tune into my videos on a weekly basis. Right, let's get back on with the video. Now, essentially, there was two viewpoints on why that was. Number one was that there was excessive plank wear occurring and the team were worried they would be disqualified. And then the second camp, which was what I was part of, it was that they had a gearbox issue and they raised the ride height to make sure that the car would finish the race and they wouldn't encounter a gearbox issue. Well, I think that particular theory has been rather and truly debunked today, because the car was very much lower to the ground than it was in Melbourne and the team didn't suffer any gremlins with the gearbox. But what has happened with Hamilton's car is, of course, that skid block on the bottom of his car, or as we call it, the plank, has had excessive wear throughout the Grand Prix. And this is the level through which the excessive wear was. In the technical regulation article 3.5.9e, there has to be a minimum thickness of the plank of 9 millimeters. Now, during the scrutineering post-race, Hamilton's was measured at 8.6 millimeters. So that is quite a big difference between what is okay and what isn't. And that is the reason behind why he's being disqualified. So it seems there is a correlation between what happened last weekend in Melbourne and the team and car's lack of competitiveness and what happened this weekend. Because if you take the two and you put them together, it really does make sense. Last weekend they were worried about their skid wear, they raised the ride height, they had no issues. This weekend they've lowered the car nearer to the floor to get more performance out of the car, and that has been a success in one point. And then, of course, in the other point, there has been more plank wear than they initially thought was going to be the case. And of course, we cannot forget the team have also had a sprint race to measure the amount of wear that occurred with their planks across both drivers. And obviously, they didn't see any alarm bells ringing as a result of that. But that obviously is not the case with Hamilton, and the car did come in underweight. But it is a very interesting situation. Now, how does this all equate to the rear suspension being the problem part on the SF-25? Well, of course, with regarding the operating window, it's like a twofold situation. For the car to be able to maximize its performance, they have to run it as low to the ground as possible. And of course, that is then leaving us with this particular issue of the skid wear being far too excessive. And essentially, really what the team is needing to do is to widen the operating window of the SF-25. And essentially for that to happen, it's probably one of a couple of things they need to do. One would be stiffening of the rear suspension, and that is something you can do on the race weekend. And it might have just been that they got caught out at this particular track, and it's not a huge issue that needs a complete change of something else on the car. Or if it isn't that, and it is a much greater and wider issue, it's going to mean a couple of things. It could be one, a complete change of floor for the SF-25, and they need to manufacture something completely different on that floor, particularly at the rear of it. Or secondly, a complete change in the rear suspension. So yeah, it's a real difficult situation that the team find themselves in, and they have a lot of work to do in this fortnight before they go to Japan. They will not be able to rectify this problem in time for Japan. It is going to take months before it is fully rectified, so do not expect any magic to happen in these next 2 weeks. It is something that they need to take their time and care with to make sure that they get everything correct with this first set of upgrades to help to rectify the problem, because the longer this goes on, the worse the season is for them. They need to get on top of it as quickly as they can. But of course, this really culminates a disaster of an opening to this 2025 season for Ferrari across the 2 weekends. I don't think I've seen a worse start from Ferrari in the history of their time in the sport. And they really have a lot of work to do within these next fortnight until we go racing in Japan. They have to turn it around and have a good result there. And it's not only these technical issues that are a problem, but also the car itself. It is not competitive enough, and they need to bring an upgrade to make it so. And I think they're under a huge amount of stress, both externally and internally, to make sure they do that. Anyway guys, I hope this has cleared everything up for you and you've enjoyed the video. If you have, do leave a like on it, share it across social media, and if you're new and have enjoyed the content, do hit the like button, subscribe as well, and turn on notifications for all future content here on F1 Unraveled. Right guys, I will catch you all in the week with some more Formula 1 videos. See you shortly.